Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Professional Diploma in Photography. Welcome to lesson number 4 of Module 1. I do hope that you have been enjoying the Professional Diploma in Photoshop up until this stage, and I hope that you have seen some improvement in the quality of your Photoshop editing skills. Now, everybody is at different levels when it comes to Photoshop. Some people are very good and very natural at editing. Some people it takes a little bit more time, like this unfortunate photographer. So this is real. This actually happened. This is a professional, or at least somebody who claimed to be a professional, who was hired to do a family photo shoot. They clearly struggled with the light, the hard light on that day. When you're photographing under bright conditions like this, you really need to use a flash, or you need to have something to kind of bounce the light back onto your subject's face to lift the shadows a little bit. But this photographer thought they could Photoshop the faces afterwards to correct them, and well, you can see the results for yourself. So this is 100% real. You can check it out online. Just simply Google Photoshop fails and you'll come across this and hundreds of others like it. Okay, but Photoshop can also be done incredibly well, like this very famous and I suppose very powerful image here on the cover of National Geographic from 2018. Says a lot within this photograph, where we're looking at this iceberg slash plastic bags. It says a lot about climate change. It says a lot about our melting ice caps. It says a lot about the fact that our oceans are filled with plastic. An expertly done composite image, which really makes you think and shows that, you know, Photoshop can really be used as a very powerful image editing tool to convey a very powerful message. So you're here with myself, William Eames, your course educator. Glad to see you all back here for lesson number 4. We've got lots and lots to cover within this lesson. If you haven't done so already, do remember to download the app. It's the easiest way to watch the lessons and indeed to catch up on recordings or to reschedule any classes that you may have missed. And you can ask any questions at any stage throughout the lessons via Morpheus. Just simply type into Morpheus to ask your question, and if Morpheus is failing to provide you with an adequate response, you can also put your questions in the classroom, and if anybody else is present, they will be able to answer your questions. Please remember to rate the responses and email us at support@shawacademy.com if you have any outstanding questions. So I do have a question for you. So I think one of the hardest things to do as a creative is to actually come up with something that you want to create. How do you get inspired? So with Photoshop, because it's such a broad program, you know, we can be making something from scratch, or we can be using photographs that we've already taken. But even, you know, no matter what it is you're trying to use Photoshop for, there still needs to be a starting point. There needs to be a start of the creative process. And it can be very difficult to know where to start. The first thing you need to do is to get inspired. So what do you do to get inspired? Let us know via Morpheus. So simply type in via Morpheus. And how I usually go and get inspired is, well, the first thing I usually do is go out and take a walk. I usually go back to nature. I think that's a great way to look for inspiration. I'll also go and see other people's work. So I'll go to galleries, see what's going on in my local area, and definitely check out what other people are doing. Even, you know, going to the movies, that's a way of getting inspired. You can draw inspiration from absolutely everywhere. Reading is also a great way to get inspired too. But let us know what you do via Morpheus. How do you get inspired? Now let's have a look at what we're going to cover in lesson number 4. We're going to talk all about selections. So up until this stage, we've had a look at how to get used to the basic interface of Photoshop. We've talked about how to make our basic adjustments in lesson number 2, and we introduced our layers and layer masks in lesson number 3, and these are very powerful tools for editing. We can now take this a step further by adding selections. So selections allow us to create images, create objects from scratch. So if you're a designer, going to be very important to understand and to use. Or we could also choose parts of photographs to either edit, to work on, or to even, I suppose, transplant and put into a different photograph to begin to create composite images. So let's have a look at some of the tools that we're going to be using throughout this lesson. So lots and lots and lots of shortcuts here. I'll just bring them all up rather than going through them all individually, because there's loads and loads and loads of them to have a look at. What we'll do first of all is we'll have a look at the I suppose the common denominators within these tools. All these selection tools share common properties, which we'll run through now in just a moment, and then we'll break down each of the individual tools and have a closer look at them. Now, you're going to find the selection tools in the toolbar, so they're located just below our move tool. So we have our marquee, our lasso, our magic wand, and quick selection tool. These are three tools that we're going to be using frequently. Then we also have the pen tool a little bit further down as well. Now, the pen tool admittedly is a little bit more difficult, more complex tool to use, so we're going to have a look at that at a bit of a later stage. But for now, we'll have a look at what are universal across these tools in terms of understanding how to use them. So here we are in Photoshop once again, and the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to go to File, we'll go New, our Control plus N, our Command plus N, and we'll just create a brand new blank document, A4. That's all good there. Hit Create. Okay, so now we've got a blank canvas that we can start to work from. And let's just begin by selecting our marquee tool. We'll just go to our rectangular marquee tool right below the move tool. And remember, your move tool should be your kind of default, your starting point. But we'll go to the rectangular marquee tool. The shortcut for that is the letter M. We've also, when you right click on or command click on it, you can see you've got some various options there as well. An elliptical marquee tool. We've also got single row marquee tools. Those ones are very good if you're doing infographics, if you're making charts through Photoshop. But we're just going to stick with our rectangular marquee tool for now. Now, when we select that, across the top here, just below our menu, we can edit the properties of the tool. Okay, now this is what we're going to see as being common right across all of our selection tools. So we have new selection, which is very straightforward. It's if we want to just create a brand new selection. Okay, we also have add to selection, we have subtract from selection, we also have intersect with selection, we have feather. So these are universal more or less across the selection tools. Beyond this, then you'll have some slight variations depending on the nature of the tool that you're using. But let's start using this marquee tool and see what we can do with it. So all we have to do is click and drag, and we can create the type of shape that we want, obviously within a kind of a rectangular or square shape or square format. You can see the dotted lines there, and when we have placed it onto the page, you can see now we have our marching ants. Okay, so this is just a very standard selection. We can choose our paint bucket here, just a little bit down the toolbar, midway there. There's a shortcut G there. You might also find it as the gradient tool here as well. But we'll select our paint bucket tool, and we can simply fill in that shape. And it's going to fill it in with whatever our foreground color here is. So, you can change that color simply by double clicking on it. Okay, very, very simple, very, very straightforward, very quickly to make a simple shape. And let's have a look at some of the other properties here now as well. So if I select this second option here called add to selection, this will allow me to keep building upon shape upon shape upon shape to create more unique shapes. Okay, so let's just have an example of that. So we'll just undo this first of all, just remove that, Control plus Z to remove that. If I draw my basic square here, just make sure you have add to selection so selected when you're undoing anything there, because you undid that selection. So we'll just drag and create our shape here. Okay, and what I can do then is if I wanted to drag and create another shape, so let's just say I do another shape here, it'll combine it with that. You can now see I've got this kind of T shape. I could also add another one there again. Okay, I'm just making a random shape here, but any selection that I make here will add to the selection that I have already made. So I can begin to make more complex shapes by using add to selection. And again, you could just fill that in. Okay, very, very easy, very straightforward and simple to do. So as you may have guessed then, subtract from selection does the opposite. If I wanted to remove something from a selection, I can use subtract from selection. So I build my shape here again, and if I bring in a second shape, it cuts it out. It removes that. So it's another way to work, and you could just pop them in wherever you like. And let's just pop that in there again. So you can just keep taking away from your selection using the remove from selection tool. Okay. Finally then, we have our intersect, which is a slightly different one. Okay, so let's create a square. We're also going to create another square here. Okay, and what the intersect does, it takes that space that's in between the crossover and creates a brand new shape. I'll just do that again because it's a little bit more of a tricky tool to use. So let's say we go with our square. Let's choose our elliptical mark key tool here instead. And I draw a circle, and we get that intersecting shape. No, we don't, because I have the subtract option selected instead. So remember, as I said, if you're undoing anything, make sure that you also select the correct tool. Let's just try that again. We'll go with our rectangular marquee. We have our intersect selection selected this time. And now again, if I draw my elliptical marquee, it's going to take that space that overlaps there, and you know, I get this nice kind of arch shape here instead. Okay, so that's how our 4 options here at the top work. And as you can kind of see, if you're a designer, you've probably seen you know, infinite possibilities with this already. It's a great way to get started with things like logo design, because you can use very, very simple shapes. You can add and you could subtract, or you can intersect using these particular tools. Okay, so that's a starting point with those tools. Now we also have these other options here. We have feather as well. So let's draw a circle here. And what I'm going to do is I'll just draw a standard circle here with no feathering attached to it. We use our paint bucket here, and we just fill that in very, very simply. Let's bring our go to our elliptical marquee tool here again, and this time I'm going to increase the feathering, and let's increase it up to 20. We'll add quite a feather to this, and again I'll just click and drag. Oh, no pixels are selected. We'll try that again. There we go, and we'll just fill that in, and now you can see that we now have this softer edge around the edge. Okay, we'll just deselect that there so you can see it there. And you could increase that even more, so we can go, let's go very extreme with that. Let's go to 100. Okay, and we'll just click and drag that again. And we can fill that in again using the paint bucket. There we go. You can see it's really soft there now. So you can see it's very, very soft there at the edges. So we can do that with any shape then when we apply a feather. Now let's just undo all of those again, and it is also possible to do all of this simply by right clicking or command click as well. So if I drag this out again and I right click while I have my marching ants, I have a couple of different options available to me here. Okay, so I've got deselect. So if I want to just remove that selection altogether, I can choose deselect. If I select inverse, it'll mean that I'm working on the outside of the circle rather than the inside of the circle. So let's see what happens now. I've selected inverse. I use my paint bucket, and it actually adds the paint to the outside of the circle rather than the inside of the circle. So that's what select inverse does. Okay, come back up to our selection tool. Now just be aware of that. So if I choose a different tool and I right click or command click, it's giving me the options for that tool that I currently have selected, not the selection. Okay, not the marching ants. So to bring, I need to go back to my selection tool and then I can right click, and then I can continue to edit on the selection that I have made. Okay, we can feather it here again, so we don't have to do it just from the top menu here. We can also just feather here. We can select and mask. We also have that as an option here as well. We are going to be using that certainly. And we can also create a new layer via copy, a new layer via cut, or just simply a brand new layer. We could also use free transform if we want to change that shape even more. And we can also fill in here as well using our color. So we can go foreground color, background color, or choose a different color altogether. So if I select foreground color, it's just an alternative way of filling that in. Okay, so there are some basic properties that we're going to find that are available to you with whatever selection tool you happen to be using. But let's have a look at these tools a little bit more. So jumping back to the slideshow, the first tool we're going to have a look at is the marquee tool. Now we've already had a look at the selection options, the feathering options. Now we'll have a look at the style, and we'll have a look at select and mask as well. So we'll quickly go back into Photoshop, and as if by magic we now have 2 new images here to work on. So the first thing I want to do is I want to take this image here of this road, and I want to place it behind the door here, so to speak. So basically below this layer. Okay, so we're going to unlock these layers simply by double clicking on them, and that makes those layers active. Usually when you double click on them as well, it's going to ask you if you want to change the layer style. We don't want to do that, we just cancel that. Okay, so we'll just double click. Actually, we don't need to even double click, we just have to click it once. So now that we have that clicked, we have our move tool selected. I can just click and drag and drop it. I should be able to just drop it behind the image there. There we go. So we want to kind of place it logically, somewhere logically in the image, in the frame, and we're going to drag it behind the door. Okay, perfect. So let's come back up to our layer 0 here, the layer of the door. We'll come over to our marquee tool, and we'll select a rectangular marquee tool. We're going to just go into the corner here of the door frame, very corner, and drag it down. Okay. And now there's something I've noticed there that is going to cause me issues, and that's I have my interselect here, or the intersect with selection, which we don't want. So we're going to just undo that, and we're going to go back to just simply new selection. So always remember to check those things out. I leave these mistakes in the lessons so that you can see it's very, very easy to make these kind of mistakes. Usually if something's going wrong in Photoshop, it's something very logical. So always just take a moment to step back and take things step by step. Okay, so let's go again. We'll make our selection here. Okay, so we've now selected that. I'll get it a bit tighter in there, and we've got our marching ants. So what can we do with this now? Okay, now that I've got this door selected, what do I want to do with this? Well, if I go to my move tool, so when I hover over the door now, when I've got it selected, you can see it's got this little scissors icon there, just where the mouse is placed. And that means if I actually click on the door, I can click and drag it, and I can actually take it away, and I'm removing the selection. Okay, and you're revealing the road and the image that's below this behind it. Okay, so you could move that there whatever way you'd like. You could just place it beside there. If you wanted to, you could actually just hit the delete key, and you could delete it altogether if you like. And you can see on the layer here as well, we now have this transparency there, and that's what's revealing the image behind it. Okay, so that's one thing that we can do with the move tool. We can actually cut out the shapes, and you can actually see there when I bring it back in, and if I continue to do that, like if I was to just pop it there again and click off the layer and then pop on it again, you can see it can get kind of messy very, very quickly. It starts cutting out lots of random images and random shapes. So be careful when using this tool. When you select what it is you want to manipulate or you want to change, when you're finished with it, remember to deselect it. So you come back up to your selection tool here, and you want to deselect it there. Okay, I remember the shortcut for that as well is Control D. So that's one thing that we can do with that. Now, if I just Control Z and place that back into the frame, I can also, with this selection made, I can actually make adjustments to this, and it'll only adjust the door frame. It'll only adjust the door. So let's say I'm going to just go to my adjustment layers here. We'll select hue and saturation, and you can see it's created a mask there, and I can start to change the color of the door. Okay, because I only have the door selected through the selection tool, I can now change the color of the door. Let's change it there to yellow. Now, realistically, you'd also have to select the frame, the door frame, or the window above it, and change the color of that to make it look a little bit more natural. Okay, but that's very, very cool. Okay, so we could make it a very deep purple if we like. Okay, good. So that's another thing that we can do when we have that selected. So two very simple things that we can do with selections. We can cut out the shape that we want, and we can actually begin to edit specific parts of the image when we have used a selection tool. Now let's have a look at another more complicated selection tool. So we're going to have a look at the lasso tool next. Now, so next up is indeed the lasso tool, as I just mentioned. So L is the shortcut here. And again, we're going to see some familiar options, our selection options to add, subtract, to intersect. We can feather as well. Anti-alias is a new one now, which will allow us to make smoother edges, to stop jagged edges, which is going to be important when using things like the magnetic lasso tool, which can create very angular shapes. And of course, we have select and mask. So jumping back into Photoshop once again. Now, just before we have a look at the lasso tool, I just want to show you the elliptical marquee tool very quickly. So we had a look at the rectangular one, but I'll have a look at the elliptical one just located below the rectangular marquee tool. And when we select the elliptical marquee tool, it's a very kind of free form circular shape. So you can see I'm just clicking and dragging it. It's quite oval, it's quite circle. But when you want to select something like, say, like this clock face, obviously it's more of a perfect circle. If you hold shift and click, it'll keep a nice circular shape for you. So you're just increasing and decreasing the size when you're dragging the mouse. It's keeping that circular shape. Okay, so you'll want to just obviously try and get it perfect, but you try to find the edge, where you want to click, and there we go. Kind of click and drag to select that face. Okay, so it's a little bit trickier there to get it 100%, but as you can see there, it's given us much more of a perfect circle than just kind of going with the free form shape. So to do that, all you have to do is shift and click, and you get that nice perfect circle every single time. But let's just close that one for now. We don't want to save anything there. We're just going to have a look at the blank document here first of all. So we're going to come down below, and we're going to just select our lasso tool. Now you can see here when I right click again or command click, we've got lasso tool, polygonal lasso tool, and a magnetic lasso tool. We'll have a look at the lasso tool first of all, and this will basically allow us to create very kind of free form shapes. So if I hover over the tool here, you can see the description is makes freehand selections. So we could use this. Now this is even better if you happen to be using like a Wacom tablet or something where you've got a lot more control using a pen. But just using the mouse, it's not as accurate. But we could just create very random free form shape. So it's kind of one way to begin drawing. That's a very, very poor S shape. Okay, so it's a way of kind of beginning to draw. We can again just take our paint bucket and we can just fill that in. Okay, we could also then just click on our move tool and begin to move that around. So we can use the lasso tool for creating very much free form kind of freehand shapes. Not the best way to do it. There is a brush tool as well. That's probably a little bit more accurate for doing it, but it is one way that we can use the lasso tool. Let's have a look at applying it to an actual image. So if I select my lasso tool here again, I can use the lasso tool to essentially draw around the objects that I want to select. Now again, as you can see here, it's not very accurate at all. It really depends on if you've got a steady hand, and you can just drag it right across the bottom there. Again, not particularly well done. But now you can see we've created our selection. We've got our marching ants going around the building. So the lasso tool, great for kind of doing free form selections. Now, it's not great in kind of geometrical shapes like this, but where the lasso tool is going to become in very, very handy is when we get to our retouching lesson, which is lesson number 6. We're going to have a look at how we can use that for highlighting blemishes that we want to remove. Because there is another way we can use our selection tools, which we will see within lesson number 6. But for something like this, we could be having a look at using our polygonal lasso tool or our magnetic lasso tool. Now, the polygonal lasso tool is designed to draw much more straight lines, as you can see here. You've got much more angular lines here by simply clicking and dragging out. You know, we've got a kind of a rectangular shape there. So you could be going around the edge of this building, and you can see very, very accurate lines. It's actually a very good tool for a shape like this, but still would need a little bit more time and a little bit more patience than what I am giving it right now. But overall, you know, much better for geometric shapes. Let's just move that out. That's not a bad quick selection. We've also got the so we just undo that, deselect. Remember, it's Control D. There we go. We can go magnetic lasso tool as well, which is also very, very useful. The magnetic lasso tool is a more intelligent selection tool, which is designed to find the edges. Now you can see there, I've gone a bit too fast. It can go out of control very, very quickly if you go too fast with it. So we're just press backspace there just to undo that, just backspace. But basically with the magnetic lasso tool, you want to just trace the edges of the object you're selecting. And the idea is that it will find those edges for you. Now, the tricky thing with this, and especially with something like this, is that, you know, you've got all these little windows here as well that it could very, very easily select to. So it can be a very slow tool to use, but it is quite accurate as well, very much sticking to the edges there as I go across. But we don't have enough time to go and select that entire object. It is very useful, but I think for something like this, you're probably best going off with that polygonal lasso tool that we could see there did a very quick selection. Okay, so that's our lasso tools. Okay, so let's move on to the next one, which is indeed our quick selection tool. So we'll just pop back into PowerPoint once again. And our quick selection tool, a little bit different from the other tools because it's more a brush. Okay, so quick selection is a brush. So rather than kind of these kind of free hand drawing kind of tools we have, these selection tools, the quick selection tool has brush properties. Now we still have our selection options. We have our add to selection, we have our minus selection. You can see we now no longer have the intersect selection, but we have a brush option, so we can change the hardness or the softness of the brush. We can select all layers if we need to do that. We can also auto enhance, which is again to try and make the edges smoother, and we have select and mask. Okay, so let's jump back into Photoshop once again and have a look at using the quick selection tool. So our other images have miraculously disappeared, and now we have this very straightforward, simple image of a bottle. So coming to our quick selection, so the fourth one down, we've got, again, if we command click or right click, we have quick selection tool and magic wand tool. So we'll just select our quick selection tool, and as I mentioned, it acts like a brush. So first of all, we're going to increase the size of it here. So we can do that by clicking down our properties here where we've got that little 15 there. You see it's only 15 pixels at the moment. We'll bring that up to double the size, about 30. We've got hardness. We can reduce that down if we want to make it a little bit softer. It has this feathering type of effect on it. And we've got spacing as well. We don't need to concern ourselves with spacing now for the moment, but we'll increase the hardness of that. And basically, we'll just make sure we have our single selection selected. We just simply paint in the selection we want to make. Now you can see there it's exactly what it says it is. It's a quick selection. It does it so fast. I'll actually even undo that. Control+Z. We're just painting in the selection that we want to make, and it tries to find the edges to make that selection. Now, of course, there's an alternative way we can do this. We always, as well, we don't have to just select the object. We could select outside of the object as well. Now, you can see there, I just did it very quickly because this is just a white space. When I select outside of the object, it selects everything very quickly. And again, you can see we've now got our marching ants on the outside of the frame, and we also have them where the bottle is. And in this case, then, we'd simply right-click and we select inverse, and we now have our bottle selected. So sometimes it's going to be easier to actually select the outside space and inverse it to select your object, depending on what it is that you're working on. Okay, so that was, the quick selection tool is one that I use nearly all the time, and we are certainly going to be using it plenty more as we move on throughout the rest of these lessons. So what can we do with this now? We have this selected. Well, let's do a couple of different things with this. So if I right click on this, I'm actually going to make a duplicate. I want to make a second one of these. Now I could do that a number of ways. I could go layer via copy or layer via cut. If I do layer via copy, you can see now I've got the second layer now created with this bottle. I could click on it and I could move it out. Okay, so we've now got a duplicate there that we can work on. Okay, so that's one way that we can do it. I'll just undo that again. I could also now again remember to go to your selection tool again to make sure that you've got that correctly selected. We could go new layer via cut. Okay, so what that does then, it creates a brand new layer, but it's cutted out from the previous layer. Okay, so it's now cutted out from the previous layer. Okay, so it's almost like selecting a mask. It's cut it out there. And you could then delete that background layer if you liked, and you've just got your floating bottle here. Okay, we can also duplicate this bottle. Okay, so it's very easy to duplicate objects. Now we have no background here, that's fine, but we can duplicate this bottle. We could keep creating layers if we wanted to, so we could just keep dragging this down and duplicating those layers by clicking new layer, and we can make as many bottles as we like. There is another way of doing it though. When we have our move tool selected, if I just click on the object and I press the Alt key, okay, or the Command key on a Mac, and I click, I can create a duplicate that way as well, and I can make as many as I like. Okay, so and you can see they're all brand new layers there. You could then, of course, highlight each of these layers, and you could begin to, make adjustments to them if you liked, changing things like the levels of them, if you wanted to make them darker, make them brighter, if you wanted to change the colors of them as well. So if we go to adjustment, hue, saturation, you could change the color of each of these bottles. So very easily done using the quick selection. What you could also do here as well is you could actually change things like the opacity of them as well, make them a little bit darker, place them behind the bottles here as well, create kind of a shadow effect there as well. Okay. So there's lots we can do here, which of course we will be doing as we continue on through the rest of the lessons when we start playing around with layers a little bit more. But it just kind of shows you the power of the quick selection tool. Very useful, very quick and handy tool to use. So the final tool to have a look at then within this lesson is going to be our magic wand tool, our magic wand. So again, we'll come back to our slideshow, and the magic wand tool, Now, there is also the pen tool as well, but we'll have a look at that in a later lesson, as it is a much more complex tool to use, and we're simply running out of time in this lesson. But the magic wand tool is a tool that's been around in Photoshop for a very, very long time. It's a very powerful selection tool. Now again, we've got our familiar options here, our selection options. What's going to be important here is our tolerance. So it changes the amount of shades that we can use in our magic wand selection. So our magic wand selection will pick up things like textures, it'll pick up things like different colors, and it'll pick up different shades. So, you know, it can be a tricky tool to use, but it can also be one if you need to sample much more complex objects like textures and shades. You're going to be using the magic wand tool. We can also use contiguous here as well, which allows us to contain our selections using edge detection. We'll have a look at how to do that. It just makes it a little bit more accurate. And again, we've got sample all layers and select and mask. Okay, so for the final time, let's jump back into Photoshop. Okay, so we're just going to close out that image now for good. We're going to open up two images here. We've got a DeLorean and we've got our road here again. Actually, we'll open up that. Let's see. We'll shift click on that. We'll control click on that. We want to open up multiple files here. We'll choose a stormy sky here as well. So let's just hit the three of them. There we go. We've got all three of those open now. So we'll come to our image of the DeLorean. We'll right click on this and we'll select our magic wand tool. So the idea of the magic wand tool, if I just click on this here, you can see that it will select a part of the object very, very quickly, and it can select very complex shapes here as well. Now I can change the tolerance of this, so I'll just undo all of that, Control Z. If I change the tolerance of this, so let's go 50 on this, and I click this again, it'll pick up even more detail. So I just clicked and dragged there very, very quickly, and you can see now it's selected the outside of the frame there as well. Okay, so you wanted to keep adding to selection. We'll undo that, and we want to just inverse that there, and we can just keep adding to the selection. So if you're finding it that it's either selecting too much or it's selecting too little, you may want to change the tolerance of it. Okay, so we're going to, let's try and go the opposite way. Let's say we only pick 10. We'll just right click on that just to deselect, and let's just see what happens when I click and drag. And you know, it's not very effective there. So I'm clicking and dragging trying to select this, and I'm having to do it much more frequently, and it's not really doing a good job there of selecting it at all. So if I increase the tolerance tenfold and I click and drag, you can see now it's selected that much faster. It's doing a much quicker selection around that, but it's actually also selected the entire frame now. I've gone too far. So it is a tricky tool to use. So I think around 50 was the right amount. So we'll just deselect all of that and go back to 50. And we can just click and drag. And you want to just do it slowly. Okay, you don't want to go too fast, because you want to make sure that you're controlling it properly. So all I'm doing is clicking and dragging, making sure that I'm basically filling in all those marching ants, because anything that isn't highlighted is going to be lost. So if I was to click and drag that now, convert to normal layer, so you can see there what's happening. So I haven't selected everything, and it's only cutting out a part of the frame. Okay, so you need to just keep going until you got all of it. Now bear in mind as well, if you're still finding that tricky to use, you can combine tools together. So I could go back to my quick selection tool, and I could just maybe go a little bit faster here by coming into the quick selection tool. Okay, and in reality, this is probably a much better tool here to use for this kind of shape, this kind of object. Okay, I've gone a little bit outside the lines there. So if I press the Alt and click, it goes minus selection. It's a quick way to go to minus selection, just to undo any selections that you made that you may not have wanted to do. Okay, but the magic wand tool, very good for difficult, complex shapes and textures, but it does take a little bit of getting used to. But we've created our selection here now, so let's just click and drag. Oh, you can see there, we haven't got everything there. So I undo that, and I'll come back to the quick selection tool. We'll just fill in all of those gaps. So you really want to take your time with something complicated like this. More time than we've really got in this lesson. Let's just click on that again. It's not perfect. We actually could feather the edges of that really. So what I'll do here, let's do that. We'll right click. Let's go to select and mask. And when I go to select and mask here, we have lots and lots of new options now available to us here that will allow us to refine our selection even more. Okay, so opacity here at the top is just to do with our view mode. So we can change our view mode here. You've got onion skin if you want to see that. You've got marching ants, whatever one you prefer, whatever is easiest for you to see. Okay, so we'll go with I prefer just going on black, that for me, but whatever one suits you best. You can change the opacity of it there as well if you like to just see a little bit more. So that's just simply our view mode. We can change the radius of the edge. So if I bring it all the way up, you can see there the black is now encroaching over the edges of it, so we would lose that part of the selection. Okay, so I can reduce it all the way down to expand out the edge as much as possible. Smart Radius will try a better job at finding those edges as well. We can smoothen out that, refine that edge as well. If I bring it all the way up, it makes it a bit too smooth, as you can see here. So we'll just bring that down. We can feather out that edge as well. Again, it's going to create a glow around it, so we don't want to do too much of that. We can increase the contrast there as well. As you can see there, it's keeping the kind of dark around the edges there as much as possible by increasing the contrast. Okay, and you can see there, you know, it's not really working too well in this instance, but we'll reduce that down. We can shift the edge. You can bring the selection in tighter to the edge a little bit more. Okay, or you can expand it out, and you can see there it brings in a little bit of the white background, but we'll bring it down a little bit. Okay, so we can adjust our selection even more by using the select and mask option. Okay, we'll decontaminate colors there. That'll create a new layer with a layer mask, or we can just simply go new layer. We'll just go new layer for now. I'll have to adjust that shift edge there again and smoothen that out. We won't spend too long on that. It's not a great selection, but we're running out of time. So that's our DeLorean badly cut out. We'll drag it up to our road. We'll just pop it there on the road. We'll press Control T to select the transform tool, and we'll just drag it out and hit enter on that. All right. Yuck. Not a great cutout there at all. So we definitely need to get in closer on that and just really refine that edge a little bit better. Okay, now I'm going to switch that layer off now, or just make it invisible for a moment. I'm going to unlock this background, and we're going to use our magic wand here again. Hopefully it's going to do a better job. And what we want to do here is we want to select our sky. Okay, so again, we're just dragging the wand here across the sky, and there we go. It's selected the sky nicely there. So again, if I right click on this, or I could also just simply go to select and mask. Now what it's doing here, it's masking out the part that I actually want to use. Okay, so I want to use the road here, and I want to use the rocks. So what I need to do here is I just need to cancel out of that again. And remember, we right click and we can inverse. So we want to select inverse. And again, we go to select and mask. And we can refine that edge there a little bit more. Okay, so we'll just do a very, very quick adjustment here. A little bit of feathering. Shift that edge a little bit more. Okay. And we're going to go to new layer with layer mask. And I click OK on that. Now I have this new layer with a layer mask. Okay, now we can actually just delete this other layer now if we like. We don't need it anymore. I can switch this layer back on. We've got our DeLorean. Now the final thing that I want to do here is I want to come back over to my stormy sky. And I'm going to just rotate this image here first of all. So if I go to image rotation, so image rotation, we want to just flip the canvas horizontally. That's fine. Click and drag it over to our image here. And as you can see there, it's now resting above the background, but it's below our DeLorean. So we want to just click and drag it to behind there. Press Ctrl plus T to select transform, and we can then just drag it there behind the background and try to just place it a little bit better. Again, just Ctrl plus T to place it there a little bit more. And you can see there why I wanted to inverse it, because if I had done it the other way, I would have lost a little bit of the background. So very, very simple composite image created using selections, okay, and select and mask. So this definitely needs a little bit more refinement, but I just wanted to show you a very quick example of what you can do using selection tools. And this is what we're going to build upon in the next lesson. We're going to do a lot of masking, we're going to do a lot of selection, and we're going to create much better composites than this. But it's just a really quick example of the potential that you can achieve using Photoshop by using selections and combining them using layers. Now, so obviously there's certainly more work that's needed around the DeLorean here in particular, and we can also see there's a bit of a glow happening around the edges here as well of our rocky landscape. That's okay, we'll leave it there for now, because in the next lesson we're going to go much more into detail on how to refine these edges and how to make our selections much more accurate. Okay, so definitely not the best work I've ever done, but that's all right for now, because we're going to come back and in the next lesson we're going to work on some more complex images, and we're going to nail down our selections. So just coming back into the slideshow, let's have a look at what is coming up in the next lesson, which is all about composites. So we're going to have a look at creating composites, which is something we've kind of been building up to throughout these lessons already. I mean, you know, the image that we just had a look at there with the DeLorean, the landscape, and the stormy sky, that is a composite, albeit a very basic you know, one that's you know, needs a lot of work, but it is a composite. So we're going to have a look at making more composites, how we can use masking to get creative and to refine those edges, as we've seen there, to remove things like the halo effect, to remove the glows. And we're also going to have a look at using blend modes as well, how we can nail our lighting and how we can get every part of the image to look as if it was all taken at the same time, so there's no kind of notable different light sources. Now, your challenge for this lesson, so what I'd like you to do for this one, I'd like you to create a logo for yourself. So, you know, whether you're a photographer, whether you're a graphic designer, or whether you just want to make a logo for yourself, to create a brand for yourself, I'd like you to do that using the selection tools. So we had a look at the marquee tools, we had a look at the lasso tool earlier on, and how we could fill those in. Also add a little bit of text as well. Remember, we had a look at text layers in lesson number 3, and maybe pop in some effects there too. So that is the end of our lesson. So just a final reminder not to drop out and to keep going to achieve your goals. We're now halfway through module number 1, and hopefully now you have seen a big improvement in the quality of your editing through Photoshop. And we still have lots and lots and lots to learn. So until lesson number 5, take care of yourselves and enjoy practicing with Photoshop.